What if a movie made you side-eye the sky? No monsters, no comforting score, just everyday birds turning a bright coastal town into slow, creeping panic. That's the design. Hitchcock wanted fear without a safety net, where silence hisses and uncertainty gnaws. He stripped away explanations, dodged tidy endings, and let ordinary flutters feel like warnings. Every shriek is sound design, every pause a dare. By the time daylight returns, you're still listening, half expecting the next wingbeat above your head. Fact 1. The movie with no music. There's no traditional score here. Instead, sound engineers Oscar Sala and Remy Gassman shaped bird calls on the mixture Trautonium, turning gentle flutters into metallic shrieks. Bernard Herrmann didn't compose cues. He consulted, nudging tempo and dynamics, while electronics carried the terror. The result isn't melody, it's tension, engineered. Each screech lands where a string swell would live, training the brain to anticipate relief that never comes. Silence becomes a taunt, too. After a burst of noise, the hush feels like a held breath, daring the next strike. By stripping out orchestral comfort, the film forces you to hear space, air, and distance as potential threats. You don't hum this soundtrack walking out. You listen harder to everything around you, wondering if that faint flutter is harmless, or the opening note of another attack right now. Fact 2. The birds are the music. There's a reason the soundtrack gets under your skin. Hitchcock treated every flutter and shriek as a musical cue. He called it, in essence, the birds are the music, swapping violins for engineered cries that spike, scatter, and cut off mid-breath. Without themes to reassure you, your ears chase patterns that never form. Quiet isn't relief, it's a loaded pause. Editors placed bursts of sound like jump chords, then yanked them away, so anticipation does the scaring for them. The dynamic range is brutal. Needle-fine whispers, then sudden blasts, forcing you to lean in and then recoil. It rewires how you watch. You stop waiting for melody and start scanning the frame, the ceiling, the sky. That design is why the final stretch feels endless, and it sets up a tougher truth. The price actors paid to sell that realism on set. Fact 3. The attic ordeal. Hedren never forgot. There's a reason the attic sequence still feels dangerous. Tippi Hedren later said she'd been promised mostly mechanical birds. Then, in the climactic week, real gulls and ravens were used anyway. Some were tethered to her costume and tossed toward her between takes. She described days of scratches, bruises, and a near miss to her eye before a doctor finally pulled her off set. Whether you call it tough filmmaking or a line crossed, the effect is undeniable. Panic that doesn't read as acting. The aftermath lingered too. She said trust was broken and their collaboration never recovered. It's a hard truth inside a classic. The realism many viewers admire came with real costs for its star. Effects shots and layered sound design did the rest. Next comes how the team turned that raw fear into the film's trickiest visuals. Fact 4. The phone booth that bit back. The phone booth sequence looks claustrophobic because it was. Tippi Hedren was boxed in by real glass, while effects teams layered in swarming birds, fire, and debris. An era before CGI, when every element had to be planned, photographed, and combined by hand. Shards flew, the booth rattled, and splinters nicked her face as crews pounded the set to sell the siege. Multiple units tackled pieces of the chaos, miniatures for the gas station blast, optical composites for dive bombs, and carefully timed breakage, so Hedren's reactions stayed raw. The result is a rhythm of hammering impacts, sudden silence, then another hit, training you to watch the frame edges like a cornered character. That's why the cut to wide feels worse, not safer. The outside is just more danger. Up next, the production hack that made those impossible composites look razor sharp instead of ghostly. Fact 5. 370 shots of pure trickery. Before digital effects existed, the birds pulled off 370 composite shots, an enormous technical feat for 1963. Every attack you see is a blend of live birds, puppets, matte paintings, and optical layers carefully aligned by hand. Each frame demanded hours of exposure, matching, masking, and reshooting to keep the chaos believable. Nothing about those sequences was automated. It was precision chaos, crafted frame by frame. Some shots combined up to 32 different film elements, stacked like translucent nightmares. Even the smallest mistakes meant starting over, wasting days of work. Hitchcock called it organized panic, a phrase that perfectly fits the film's method. The result was seamless terror that looked far more violent than it really was. But as ambitious as that was, it still wasn't enough. So he brought in in unexpected help from a studio best known for animated mice. Fact 6. Disney's hidden hand. Here's the twist. Part of The Birds was built using Disney technology. Hitchcock borrowed the studio's cutting-edge sodium vapor yellow screen process, developed by animation pioneer Iwerks, to merge actors and bird footage with unmatched clarity. Traditional blue screen made wings blur or vanish, but this new system separated colors so precisely that every feather stayed visible. Disney technicians even helped supervise the composite work at Universal, quietly bridging horror and family filmmaking. It was the first time the two studios collaborated on such a scale. The partnership gave The Birds its crisp, eerie realism, proof that terror sometimes hides in technical genius. The clean matte lines also meant the chaos could expand safely around Hedren and the cast, and that innovation led directly to Hitchcock's most challenging image yet, the silent, suffocating finale that still makes audiences hold their breath. Fact 7. The hardest image Hitchcock ever built. The film's final shot, Melanie and the others driving away through a sea of motionless birds, was one of Hitchcock's toughest creations. It wasn't a single photograph, but a stack of 32 separate film elements: live-action car footage, background matte paintings, optical bird layers, and subtle animation to keep the flock alive. Each layer had to line up perfectly, or the illusion shattered. It took weeks just to synchronize the lighting and shadows. Hitchcock called the process an experiment in patience, but the payoff was unforgettable. The stillness of the birds made the silence feel infinite, as if the world had stopped breathing. No music, no closure, just the uneasy calm after chaos. That ending redefined cinematic tension, proving that sometimes the quietest image can feel the loudest, and yet he still wanted to push the terror one scene further. Fact 8. The ending that never happened. Hitchcock originally wanted one last, haunting image: the Golden Gate Bridge completely covered in perched birds, stretching across San Francisco like nature's silent victory. It would have taken months of effects work and a massive budget to pull off safely, so the studio shut it down. Still, Hitchcock couldn't shake the idea. He described seeing it in his dreams long after the movie's release. The unused ending would have transformed the story from local terror to global omen, suggesting humanity's total surrender to chaos. Though it was never filmed, that mental picture became part of the film's mythology, a phantom finale fans can still imagine. Instead, he left audiences with eerie quiet and unanswered questions. No closure, no triumph, just the uneasy thought that the attack might continue anywhere. Sometimes, the scariest scene is the one that never got shot. Fact 9. The trailer with no footage. Most movie trailers tease explosions or stars, but The Birds went the opposite way. Hitchcock appeared alone, in front of bird cages, giving a calm, mock-serious lecture about humanity's poor treatment of our feathered friends. Then, shadows flickered, wings beat, and his polite tone cracked into chaos. Not a single frame from the actual film was shown. It was clever misdirection, part humor, part warning. Hitchcock used himself as bait, promising terror without revealing a thing. The approach baffled studios, but fascinated audiences who lined up out of curiosity alone. Even the trailer felt like an experiment in tension. You waited for the attack that never came. In 2 minutes, Hitchcock proved he didn't need jump cuts or monsters to make people nervous. All it took was silence, suggestion, and one man calmly daring you to look up. Fact 10. Hitchcock's cameo with a wink. Every Hitchcock film hides a brief cameo, and The Birds features one of his most personal. Just minutes into the story, he strolls out of the pet shop carrying 2 small white terriers, his own dogs, Jeffrey and Stanley. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment, but it sets the tone perfectly. Calm before the chaos. The director loved these subtle appearances, calling them his signature inside joke with the audience. In this case, it's also symbolic. Man casually walking pets before nature turns on him. The cameo became a tradition fans still hunt for in every Hitchcock movie, but here it feels almost prophetic. Within minutes, those harmless birds in the background will become predators. The master of suspense never wasted a frame. Even his walk-on came with a warning. Next comes the sound trick that made every flutter feel alive. Fact 11. How the screams were played. Hitchcock didn't need violins, he needed voltage. Oscar Sala performed the mixture trotonium like an instrument, bending bird calls with filters, subharmonics, and tape edits until they sounded metallic and predatory. Remy Gassman shaped bursts like musical phrases: attack, rest, attack, while Bernard Bernard Herrmann advised on pacing, not melody. Instead of themes, you get textures, rasp, hiss, flutter, then a knife-edge shriek that cuts out mid-breath. Editors laid these spikes against hard silences, so your brain keeps reaching for a pattern and never finds one. The dynamic range is ruthless, whispers that make you lean in, followed by blasts that make you flinch. Nothing repeats enough to feel safe, which is the point. The track doesn't guide emotions, it ambushes them. By the time the attacks escalate, you've been conditioned to fear air itself, the space between sounds, because that's where the next hit hides. Fact 12. The schoolhouse that wouldn't stay fiction. That eerie school with crows lining the jungle gym, it's a real Victorian building. The Potter Schoolhouse in the town of Bodega, just inland from Bodega Bay. Hitchcock used the exterior for the children's flight sequence and for those slow burn cutaways as more birds gather, turning a postcard into a threat. Locals still visit the site, now restored, because the image branded itself into movie memory. White clapboards against a dark, waiting sky. Interiors were largely recreated on sound stages, but the location's angles did the heavy lifting. Long approach, tight doorway, horizon full of wires and perches. Even without audio, the architecture feels like a trap. That's the trick. Make a sunny landmark feel unsafe, then let the silence finish the job. The schoolhouse anchors the film's geography, and it points to how multiple studios stitched the attacks together shot by shot. Fact 13. A patchwork of studios. Behind the seamless panic was a relay race of studios. Universal produced the film, but effects work sprawled across specialists. Disney's technicians advised on sodium vapor mats. Fox and MGM optical departments engineered stubborn composites, and independent matte painters extended horizons so flocks could swarm. Each shop owned a slice. Phone booth glass and fireplates here, children running plates there, attic elements somewhere else. The pieces returned to Universal to be layered, timed, and rephotographed until every beak and shadow lined up. That cross-lot pipeline kept wings crisp, glass dangerous, and backgrounds alive, all without computers. Think of it as a 1963 cloud render farm, only with film cans shuttled by truck. The collaboration didn't just sell scale, it protected actors too. More illusions, fewer uncontrolled birds. Next comes a quieter trick hiding in plain sight. The green thread in Melanie's wardrobe that signals trouble before it erupts. Fact 14. The green that signals danger. Melanie's seafoam suit isn't just wardrobe, it's a warning light. The cool green reads calm, wealth, and control when she breezes into Bodega Bay. Then Hitchcock weaponizes it. As attacks mount, the spotless wool turns blotched with dust and streaked with red, so your eye tracks her, unraveling in real time. Green also pulls double duty against the coastal palette. Grass, bay water, schoolyard paint. So Melanie blends into nature right before nature turns on her. The color becomes a trap, serenity masquerading as safety. Posters and lobby cards reinforce the hue, making that silhouette iconic before audiences even sat down. Because she wears the same look through crisis after crisis, continuity pushes a visual arc without a single speech. By the time she reaches the attic, that soft green feels sickly, like the air has gone stale. Next up, the off-screen tensions that shadowed the film's legacy. Fact 15. The night TV fell silent. When the birds finally fluttered onto American television in 1968, it wasn't just a rerun, it was an event. Households tuned in by the millions, turning a living room screening into a national hush. The movie's odd soundscape, metallic cries, then weaponized quiet, hit differently on home speakers. Without theater acoustics, the silence felt even tighter, like the air had been vacuumed out of the room. For many viewers, this broadcast was their first encounter with Hitchcock's no-score experiment, and ratings records tumbled. The premiere helped cement the film's pop culture afterlife. Local stations replayed it, schoolyards mimicked the jungle gym scene, and tourist maps started highlighting Bodega and its schoolhouse. Television didn't blunt the film's power, it multiplied it. Suddenly, the threat wasn't confined to a dark cinema. It perched on every rooftop antenna, waiting for the next scheduled airing. Fact 16. Allegations that changed the legacy. Tippi Hedren didn't only leave with cuts and bruises. She left with a story she repeated for decades. In interviews and her memoir, she alleged that Hitchcock crossed personal boundaries, reacted vindictively when she rebuffed him, and used her contract to limit new roles. Others on and around the productions have disputed parts of her account, but the claims permanently reframed how many viewers read The Birds. On-screen dread paired with off-screen pressure. The attic sequence becomes harder to separate from workplace power, and the no-score experiment starts to feel like a silence that covers more than sound. Hedren later rebuilt her career on her own terms, but she said the experience never fully stopped echoing. Even admirers of the film now watch with an extra layer of complication, a masterpiece that thrills while raising questions about the human cost, and yet the audience only grew. Fact 17. A masterclass in engineered anxiety. The scariest part of The Birds isn't the pecking, it's the design. Hitchcock strips away the things that usually calm us. Theme music, clear motives, tidy resolutions. Scenes stretch a beat longer than comfort allows, then snap with sudden bursts of motion and metallic cries. Editing dodges patterns, so your brain can't predict the next impact. Even dialogue scenes keep danger in the corners. Telephone wires, rooftops, empty skies that might fill at any second. And when release finally seems near, the movie refuses the end card, letting the quiet hang like unfinished business. It's dread by subtraction. Remove explanation, remove rhythm, and let the audience supply the fear. That's why the final drive-out feels endless. You're waiting for a sound that never comes. Up next, a bit of set lore that adds a crooked smile to all that tension. Fact 18. The wheat and whiskey rumor. Here's the set lore fans love to debate. Were some birds mellowed with a grain and whiskey mix? Star Rod Taylor joked about wheat and whiskey keeping gulls docile, and the quip turned into legend. Treat it as colorful rumor, not lab-tested method. Trainers mainly relied on food cues, darkness, and timing. Even then, the birds had minds of their own. What matters for the movie is the vibe that story creates. A production so determined to get the shot that cast and crew tried anything safe and legal to manage chaos. It also explains the film's strange energy, half choreography, half wild card. Whether or not the cocktail ever touched a beak, the tale fits the birds. Discipline meeting unpredictability, and it tees up the next reveal. The thing that truly controlled your pulse wasn't alcohol or training. It was silence. Fact 19. Know the end, just unease. Most thrillers land on a cymbal crash and a tidy card. The end. The Birds denies you both. After that layered final image, the film drifts into quiet and simply stops, refusing a verdict on what's happening or why it began. No cops rolling in, no scientist with an answer, no sunrise miracle. Just a world that might stay like this. That choice keeps the movie alive after it's over. Your mind keeps scanning power lines, rooftops, and empty skies, writing its own final scene. Theaters emptied into parking lots where flocks circled like extras from the set. By rejecting closure, Hitchcock turns the audience into co-authors of dread. The sequel plays in your head on the drive home, and that open door sets up the very last takeaway, what this story is really about when the birds fly off the screen. Fact 20. The quiet that stays with you. Strip away the pecks and screams, and you're left with the film's real punch, a familiar world that stops obeying its rules. Streets, rooftops, playgrounds, nothing changes, yet everything feels hostile. Hitchcock doesn't tell you what the birds mean. He lets ambiguity do the stalking. That's why the ending lingers. The car rolls out, the sky hangs open, and your senses won't stand down. You listen harder to ordinary noise. Wing beats, wire hum, a distant call that might be nothing, or the system breaking again. The movie's secret isn't punishment, it's calibration. It retunes how you hear silence and how you read calm. Afterward, blue daylight looks like a setup, and tidy answers feel suspicious. The lesson is simple and unnerving. Terror doesn't need monsters. It only needs the everyday to tilt a few degrees and never tilt back. Strip away the trivia, and you're left with a film that rewires how you hear silence and trust daylight. No neat motive, no score to guide you, no the end to let you exhale. Just ordinary birds and a world tilting a few degrees off true. That's why it lingers. You leave the theater scanning rooftops and wires, listening for wing beats you can't prove you heard. Fear doesn't roar here, it waits. And once you notice it, you can't unhear it.